and I want to help you find a great visual novel to read and experience. And I want to give you my recommendations on which are the best of the best and which ones in particular may pique your interest. How, you may ask? Through a retrospective tier list containing every visual novel I've reviewed this year. Links to their in-depth reviews are in the description down below. And if you want to check out last year's video, that's also available down there as well. And lastly, I'll give out some awards to some honorable mentions to the best of their respective categories. Of course, this is my opinionated tier list, and you are free to agree or disagree. If you have any differing opinions, I would love to hear them. And with that said, let's begin. 9, Episode 3 and 4 are the continuations of the superpowered chuuni action fantasy with a dash of romance mixed in there, and it's a visual novel series that just keeps increasing the stakes with every release. Episode 3 focuses on Haruka Kosaka, a girl with split personalities, switching between her shy, reserved side and her domineering, confident side. Despite originally being with the enemy organization, we get a view into her own personal affairs, and all of her flustered expressions. She's a definite cute girl. However, I do think that out of all the episodes, Volume 3 is the second to last in terms of personal preference. The narrative is very split between the romance aspect and the overarching narrative, resulting in a lack of clear focus. Speaking of grand narrative, Episode 3 finally reveals its hand on who the true villain of the series is, and oh boy, does it get exciting. I give 9, Episode 3 a B. Meanwhile, Episode 4, what an epic climactic conclusion. Very in line with its chuuni moe goodness. If I had to rate the series episodes, it would be in this order. My complaint with Episode 3, as I mentioned before, is removed in this, as Episode 4 blends the romantic aspects along with its grand narrative, doing a deep dive on the heroine's insecurities. Episode 4 focuses on the judgment declaring Chunibyo Noa Yuki, and it's here we finally get to see peak performance Noa in all of her greatness. Now, don't get me wrong, Sora's a fantastic sister, the pinnacle of emoto routes. I've never seen a more hilarious 8 scene before, involving paper bags of all things. But Noa just hits me with her characterization and her personal struggle the hardest, especially when Episode 4 rips your heart out. Fully engaging in all of its fantasy superpowers and meta elements, Episode 4 is a worthy title for its formal conclusion to the series. I give 9, Episode 4 an S. Bustafellows is a crime fiction thriller addition to the otome genre, and it's one of the best I've seen. Featuring a time-traveling female protagonist, Bustafellows follows the adventures of 5 guys, each with their own special occupations and skills as they deal with the underworld of society. For as thrilling as it sounds, it also has casual, lighthearted moments, where these guys all act like roommates and hang out together, at least before it deep dives into the guys' troubled pasts, each full of sensitive topics and relaying genuine, heartfelt emotions. But as corny as it all sounds, all of them work together to help each other out in the worst of times. The story does fall flat in some areas due to the seemingly random plot occurrences and lack of build-up, especially in regards to the true endings. Also, despite its very above average production and visuals, it's got this cumbersome menuing system for PC users that makes it incredibly awkward to navigate. Despite those two things though, this one's a clear pickup for any otome fans out there. Bustafellows gets an A from me. Now, Dohna Let's Do Bad Things Together is the most aesthetically colorful Aero RPG visual novel I've read to date. I mean, just look at these visuals. However, what most people aren't suspecting is how deceptively dark it is. Taken from my full video review, if you're going to buy Dohna, be prepared for the less than ethical, morally questionable management of sex workers. That's right, Dohna, for it being the quote-unquote Persona 5 of Aero visual novels, has brothel gameplay. Considering that this was developed by the same people who made Evenical and Rance, I was not surprised. It's Alisoft, but your average person won't know that. There's some very dark content in here, including the bad ending CGs featuring the female cast and the character arcs of some of the special talents. However, despite all of its problematic issues, I actually still had a lot of fun playing this game and watching all of the fun banter and conversations between the whole cast. Alisoft really knows how to make fun games, while also adding some pretty great girls. Dohna is a title that suffers from a moral and audience whiplash, and while the story isn't the most well put together, it still was a lot of fun and an enjoyable experience, given you put in the work for it. Dohna Let's Do Bad Things Together gets a B from me. Doki Doki Literature Club is the deceptive school slice of life turned psychological horror that took the internet by storm. It's hard not to know about this special visual novel. However, there is controversy behind it, for some individuals claim it to be a cheap story that emphasizes shock value above all else. Now, while I do admit it does place emphasis on its surprising and shocking elements, it tackles the psychological horror aspect very effectively in the visual novel medium. That said, most people expecting a traditional story and characterization are going to be disappointed, and that includes myself. After all, this was a piece of work that was designed to market to the mainstream audience, and not typical visual novel fans. Which is why I'm pleasantly surprised at its new re-release in Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. Doki Doki Literature Club Plus adds intimate side stories to each of its character duos, and it heavily focuses on the girls' trauma and emotional hangups in a very genuine and serious manner. This deeper level of depth gives the game more heart than how it initially appears, discussing very real mental health issues. Some people may have wanted DDLC to have more horror elements, but honestly, I would much rather prefer this over any jump scare in the book. And best of all, the base game of Doki Doki Literature Club is free to play, short, and on Steam, so anyone can come across it easily and experience the main story. Doki Doki Literature Club Plus gets an A from me. Ah yes, Euphoria, the most infamous eroge out there, being as vile and repulsive as you may have heard, with so many NSFW warnings and all of the literal shit you can have put into it. But what most people don't suspect is that it's actually a great tragic love story. In case you don't know what Euphoria is, it's about a group of individuals trapped in a room where the main character Keisuke has to commit immoral acts on them in order to escape. What's worse is that he actually gets aroused by the horrific situation and the cruel acts he's doing. Euphoria is actually thorough in detailing this mental struggle between Keisuke's bestial lust and moral common sense. Of course, the death game-esque scenario and the domineering sadistic mistress whispering in his ear doesn't help. There's lots of versions of twisted love at play here, whether it's the sadistic woman Nemu, the innocent childhood friend Kanai, or the emotionless stoic girl turned cult leader Byakuya. Keisuke's relationship with each of them is very much horrifying, even nightmarish. It's actually pretty interesting to read, in between all of the repetitive, torturous scenes and screams of agony. Unfortunately, all of the juicy content is info dumped in the last quarter of the game, in which some plot elements can be confusing and vague, including one that had me utterly confused, appalled, and disgusted all at the same time. Euphoria is not for the average person, but for those willing to endure, will be treated to a pretty unique, unconventional, dark love story. Euphoria gets a B from me. And next we have Fatal 12, the most compassionate battle royale death game I've read. Set in a real-world setting, its participants use investigative tactics and cunning rather than brute force to win. It's not your typical flashy death game, and that's actually why I recommend it so much. For it being on the shorter end of visual novels for its length, it is a slow starter, mostly due to the main character being a pacifist in the beginning, but over time, it's a visual novel that explores each of its characters and their life histories and regrets. Even the more aggressive characters ended up having really great development arcs. They aren't treated as purely evil villains, but actual complex human beings. Fatal 12 is one of those underground hidden gems that most people end up missing out on, but it's one that'll be better than what you initially expect. Fatal 12 gets an A from me. Flowers Volume 2, or The Book of Summer, continues its elegant Yuri visual novel series featuring adolescent relationships, transforming two very unlikely people from bitter haters to intimate lovers. And it's pretty fantastic. All thanks to our wisecracking, snarky, mischievous outcast over here, Erika Yaigaki. With its beautiful watercolor aesthetic and relaxing music, Flowers' first volume was an excellent introspective look into forming relationships and getting out of your comfort zone. Suo was a great character to explore this, being extremely reserved and shy. The only downside is that some people may find Suo's story a very lethargic one. Still, I have given it very high remarks. However, in Volume 2, Erika becomes the main character and fixes that issue, due to her very unladylike personality at the center of attention. Her rebellious attitude is what gives this volume energy. It's entertaining to watch alone, and in conversations, most people take her sarcastic words at face value, often having unexpected gay results. Erika acts all jokingly, but she also establishes a clear distance from others. So when Chidori, another equally isolated person, becomes a new amity partner, Erika is forced to face her. And it's through their interactions that the both of them begin to open up. Their asocial and eccentric personalities is what brings them both together. It's this development from heavily guarded and distant individuals to intimate, compassionate partners is what I adore so much from this character-driven Yuri drama. Flowers Volume 2 gets a S from me. Now this is a visual novel that had me captivated from beginning to end, to the point where I was thinking to myself every day, I could be reading Muramasa right now. Set in a historical fictional Japan, Full Metal Demon Muramasa tells the story of a man's cruel journey as he wields the cursed enchanted suit of armor, Muramasa, where with each evil villain he defeats, he must take the life of an innocent soul in exchange. It's a tightly written story that questions moral righteousness, as each individual in Muramasa holds faith to their own principles, and when those ideals clash, it makes for some great engaging storytelling. It's even got some pretty hilarious moments sprinkled in there despite its very depressingly dark setting. It's not for the faint of heart though, as Muramasa deals with some heavy mature topics and graphic explicit scenes, purely from the first chapter alone. The heavy historical and political Japanese influence, the longer than average fight scenes, and the cumbersome choices might take away from the experience. But what it does present is a thrilling yet thought-provoking story, one that had me really think about the different perspectives of self-righteous justice. Muramasa does a great job at exploring those themes, and it rightfully deserves a spot as one of the best visual novels out there. Another great title brought to you by the developers at Nitro Plus, who also made Steins Gate, You, Me and Her, and Saya no Uta. Full Metal Demon Muramasa gets an S from me. Fxxx Me Royally is a cute otome visual novel with a very sex-positive female protagonist, where a kiss is a greeting and sex is a conversation. If you've read Fashioning Little Miss Lonesome, this is from that same developer. Now, in most otome games, they feature a bunch of sexy, handsome-looking men. These guys, however, they're more on the cuter side, like if you were to apply the moe factor to male love interests. Fxxx Me Royally is a very lighthearted tale about a princess traveling to another world and hooking up with guys in search of her future husband. There's some sweet romance between the heroine and her male companions, and for a majority of the time, the story is pretty casual, as each party learns about the other's unique worldly culture. Even includes a Yuri and threesome route. Lots of love to go around. Fxxx Me Royally gets a B from me. Grisaia Phantom Trigger, the action-oriented spin-off series of the original Grisaia trilogy, featuring a brand new cast of characters working as assassin mercenaries to defend the country against future threats. Now, it's not the same as the original Grisaia trilogy, nor do the original cast return to this side series. But if you were interested in the action mercenary aspects of Yuji's life, you'll get plenty of that here. This first volume acts as a starting prologue where we get introduced to the lives of these female assassins through the eyes of Arisa, their new teacher slash normal everyday citizen. With most first volumes with an episodic series, volume 1 is dedicated to introductions and setting the groundwork. It does fine in that regard, but it lacks the energy momentum needed to carry on, which is why I would actually recommend picking up volume 2 along with volume 1 to get a full idea of what Phantom Trigger is all about. Each of the volumes puts a spotlight on a heroine, and volume 2 focuses on the rabid dog Rena, the vicious frontal assault of the team. Here we get to know more about her orphan past leading up to the present time. We also get to see the cast embark on a full mission, one against the Russian mafia. Grisaia Phantom Trigger Volume 1 gets a C, meanwhile Volume 2 gets a B. Despite its comparison to the original, I think it's a pretty alright series, and again, I recommend checking out the first 2 volumes if you want an idea of what this series has to offer. After all, it is quite a series, being 7+ volumes long. Harmonia is another addition to the Studio Key makes sad stories about sad robots, now with feeling. Considering that Planetarium was utterly heartbreaking, and one of the best beginning visual novels I recommend, you might ask, how does Harmonia do in comparison? Well, it does get emotional like any other Key work, like Clannad, Air, or Little Busters, but it's not as gripping as either of those. It's got a fine enough setup for its setting and characters, however the story is largely dependent on its big plot beats, and if you can predict those, you'll likely reach the full truth before its conclusion. What I mean by this is that if you can see the sad moments coming, it'll have less of an impact, and that's the main drawback here. It's still a pretty short story you can finish within a night that still packs a punch though. Harmonia gets a C from me. Next we have I Walk Among Zombies volumes 2 and 3, the last 2 volumes in this zombie apocalypse series, and one of the only zombie apocalypse visual novels that's out there. It's also the only visual novel I know where you can do it with a zombie heroine. Volumes 2 and 3 continues this zombie thriller featuring our anti-hero protagonist as he comes in contact with other humans. He's a largely selfish individual looking out for number 1, and since he's immune, he doesn't have to worry about any zombies. Instead, it's the humans he might have to watch out for, and that's what these 2 volumes explore. Volume 2 focuses on the only doctor left in the world, and she gets some pretty decent development during her arc, as she holds a lot of responsibilities in this salvaged community. Well, at least before she gets completely dropped in Volume 3, for Mitsuki to return triumphantly as the main girl, despite her Stockholm Syndrome-esque situation. Unfortunately, because the author stopped writing this series, the story ends inconclusively at the end of Volume 3. story, more of a the battle will continue and so on and so forth. If you like zombie apocalypse stories and want it in visual novel format, this will be one to check out. But you'll have to deal with the anti-hero protagonist and his very morally questionable actions, asking particular favors in exchange for safety. I Walk Among Zombies Volumes 2 and 3 get a B from me. And next we have Kinkoi, Gold, and Loveriiche, one of the best romance visual novels I've read this year and a must-buy for anyone who loves blonde anime girls. While being visually crisp and vibrant with color, I can definitely say that there wasn't a heroine in a route that I didn't like. From the charismatic gal girl Reina to the whimsical royal princess Sylvia to the rebellious and mysterious delinquent Ria, all of the girls are very attractive to watch. Just the first introduction alone gives you an idea of what the visual novel's atmosphere and tone's all about, in which our main character whisks away a princess from trouble only for it to be a misunderstanding and being forced to attend a prestigious academy at her whims. It's exciting and energetic no matter which heroine you follow, and our main character isn't a complete blank slate either. Although the visual novel is very horny when it wants to be, risking damage to its tone and characterization, including one particular 8 scene where, despite how steamy it was, I found it extremely contrived in the context of the story and characters. Now, you might be thinking, it's another romance visual novel with pretty heroines, and to be honest, it is that, but where it really hits full force is in its true route, ending on a drama-heavy conclusion that will surely tug at your heart. And the best part of it all of Kinkoi's routes build up to this final route and is centered around its main theme of golden time. Kinkoi is a fantastic romance visual novel that I would highly recommend. Kinkoi, Gold, and Loveriiche gets an S from me. Kuroinu, a dark fantasy visual novel that's quite infamous for its hentai adaptation, for what is basically the eroge equivalent of Berserk. As much as I compare it to Berserk from its setting to its not guts main character, it's absolutely nowhere near the quality. It poses as this medieval fantasy with grand epic fight scenes, but there's none of that anywhere in here. Instead, it becomes a gauntlet of corruption stories filled with the brink of non-consensual H scenes and lots of torturous screams of agony. Even if you were to endure through all of the 8 scenes, it gets repetitive very quickly, and there isn't a real story backbone to keep your attention. This is actually the extremely rare case where I would recommend the anime adaptation over the actual visual novel. But either way, it's still material regardless. Kuroinu gets a D from me, although very borderline C for creativity. Loca Love is diabetic sweetness for the soul, featuring a very loving kohai that wants to take care of you. It's nothing but sweet, fluffy romance that's also a little bit sexy at times. Of course, there's nothing wrong with something on the more casual side, but don't expect anything super in-depth in regards to story. And for this one in particular, anything substantial besides the characters calling each other cute all of the time. There are 3 volumes in this series, each focusing on a different heroine, but the premise between all of them are very similar. Check out the second volume if you want to classmate love interest with massive thighs, or the third volume if you want a petite but older senpai love interest. Either way, if you're looking for a short vanilla love story with some sexy scenes here or there, Loca Love might be up your alley. Loca Love Volume 1 gets a C from me. Majikoi is up there as one of the best in the trope of the power of friendship and bonds trumps all, right up there next to Little Busters and Higurashi, while also being very full of hype. Majikoi has an overwhelmingly large cast of characters, all strange and unique in their own right. It's a visual novel where you'll rarely get bored by what's happening on the screen, while with their sprites flying all over the place. In terms of the main group, the Kazama family, it really feels like you're with them, watching an intimate group of friends hang out and banter between each other. As you continue to read Majikoi, you'll get easily more attached to these characters, and even more so in their character routes. For example, this precious girl. She was my least favorite out of all of the heroines starting out, but by the latter half of her route had me absolutely rooting for her. She's now my favorite character in all of Majikoi, and that's only the comedy story slice of life aspect. There's also the fact that all of these heroines can kick ass. Specializing in some martial art, these characters bring the action in full hype, making for some really satisfying bombastic moments. Although I did have to completely throw out my suspension of disbelief when a particular character started shooting laser beams and creating tornadoes out of her fists. The final true route is also unnaturally darker than the rest of the visual novel, and Yamato can be an uncomfortable sex maniac maniac at times. And yes, I'm referring to that one scene in Chris's route. But aside from that one specific moment, Majikoi is an extremely enjoyable visual novel. And there's plenty more sequel/fandiscs out there waiting to be read, so go support Majikoi if you can. Majikoi gets an S from me. Now, if I had to summarize what makes Meteor World Actor so great, it would be our main character Ruka Hiryu, a rebellious alcoholic sleazeball that's considered the worst detective in the entire police force. But god damn it, he's entertaining and does a damn good job when it matters. Ruka Hiryu is a shitty person, and that's what makes him fantastic to watch. The way everyone just banters and rips into him for his sarcastic and problematic behavior is so entertaining to read, especially when it's paired with a great localized script. He's even been given a younger, earnest recruit to look after. It really captures that buddy cop dynamic so well. And that's only the interactions between the cast members. Let's not forget about the expansive world they live in, full of elves, pixies, espers, dragons, and many more, in the city where the sun doesn't shine. We are taken through Ruka's detective adventures where he sees all aspects of life as they come in contact with the law, and there's some great societal world building that's established here. Of course, not everyone plays nice, and neither does Ruka when it comes to those connected to his worst enemy. Meteor World Actor is an entertaining read all throughout. The biggest problem, however, is that Meteor World Actor is an unresolved story with open-ended conclusions, and that's gonna turn off a lot of people. There's a lot of plot threads left hanging, and unfortunately, it's a notable quirk of the author Kinugasa Shogo, the same writer behind Akatsuki no Goe and the light novel series Classroom of the Elite. There is a sequel currently out at the time of this video's release. Despite that, I still had an extremely fun time reading Meteor World Actor, and it's one that stands out as one of my favorite titles out there. Meteor World Actor gets an A from me. Okay, if you read this, you're either one of two types, or both. Either you got it for the meme, or you really love cat girls. Otherwise, you're gonna have to really convince me of another positive to Nekopara, because this volume ain't cutting it. The story is as simple as you can get. The owner of a bakery employs his cat girls to serve as shop waitresses. It should be obvious, but don't expect anything real page-turning, nor should you look too deep into the societal relationship dynamics between human and cat girl. It's cat girls. Please just turn your brain off and enjoy a slowly increasing catgirl harem. I ain't judging if Nekopara somehow landed in your hands. It's specifically targeted towards a niche demographic, much to the same extent as Emoto Paradise. I myself am indifferent towards catgirls, but as someone looking for something with a little bit more meat on it and isn't interested in beating my own meat, this ain't it. Will I end up reading more? Probably not. But call me when Shigure gets a route because she's best girl. Nekopara Volume 1 gets a C for catgirls. Ninki Seiyuu How to Raise a Pop Voice Actress is exactly what the title describes. A mostly realistic look into the voice acting industry through the lens of up-and-coming voice actresses. If you're familiar with works that deal with the creative industry like Shirobako, this is more in line with that type of vibe. While still being a romance comedy drama, there's a lot more emphasis on the personal drama of its heroines as they encounter problems in their careers. All of them deal with issues that have them face their own insecurities, whether it's confidence problems, rising popularity, or just not being able to get that job. These conflicts tend to be a slight variation of each other, and the resolution tends to happen the same way, but it's still a nice introspective look into the voice actress's mental state in their careers. Ninki Seiyuu gets a B from me. OshiRabu Love or Die is the sequel to OshiRabu Waifus over Husbandos, where its main female protagonist has to come to terms with a difficult decision: who to marry, her devoted girlfriend or her SSR male gacha swordsman JPEG. OshiRabu is a fine pickup if you're looking for a very short Yuri visual novel that's cute, lighthearted, and fun. Visually, it looks colorful, but as a story, it's very simple with very little conflict. In the original visual novel, we see Ren's attempts at wooing Akuru, but in this sequel, we get more cute moments between the two of them together in their relationship. However, I still find the dynamic between these two imbalanced. Ren carries the passionate love between the two of them on her back, and Akuru still struggles in her devotion. It's like this for both the original and the sequel. OshiRabu is a case where it really just needs more time, either to have more cute, intimate moments between the two, or to have more potential conflict. Don't get me wrong, I like how we got more of OshiRabu, and it's a nice short read, but what we got and how much of it wasn't that engaging or satisfactory. OshiRabu Love or Die gets a C from me. And next we have PARQUET. PARQUET is Yusuf's first all-ages title, where instead of cute moe girl romance stories, we get a visual novel solely dedicated to its premise and story. Yusuf is known for their cute, lovable heroines and sweet romances, but its actual story leaves a lot to be desired. So, how does PARQUET actually do? Well, for their first venture, it's not bad, but there definitely can be improvements. PARQUET tells the story of a man who was illegally created from the memories of others, who goes into the real world to discover himself. He then comes across two individuals whose lives have been affected by these same brain memory altering experiments, where it's revealed that these two individuals are actually two different personalities coexisting in the same body. It's a neat premise that starts off simple in its slice of life moments before building to these emotional drama high moments. It's not the most sound in terms of storytelling, as there are directionless moments here and there in the plot, but PARQUET was a positive in my book. It also still has that same Ubisoft brand of cuteness from its leading heroines. It's also a fairly short visual novel too, estimating at around 10 or so hours, at least compared to your typical longer visual novels of 30+ hours. What's interesting and pretty cool is that PARQUET is also available on mobile too, if you want to do some visual novel reading on the go, which is quite nice. PARQUET gets a B from me. And to follow up on the Ubisoft train, we have one of their mainline titles, Riddle Joker. Riddle Joker is your classic Ubisoft romance visual novel with a touch of action mixed in. Here, our main character infiltrates a school full of superpowered individuals to aid in his spy missions. It sounds thrilling at first, but it really is your typical school romance story, with some spy missions here and there as a side job. Riddle Joker actually reminds me of another one of Ubisoft works called Riot. While I much rather prefer the story and premise a lot more in Riot, I really like the Riddle Joker heroines a lot more. Nanami is a super cute brocon, Mayu is that Onesan type that we never fully got in Senran Banka, and Ayase, while she's quite the departure from your poster girl Ubisoft heroine, her banter and most of all her confession stole my heart. Although this is entirely personal preference. I say that because Ubisoft visual novels are a very specific taste that's consistent, where if you don't like its brand of romance, chances are you won't like any of their other titles as well. Riddle Joker places more of an emphasis on making these heroines attractive to fall in love with, but the premise and character routes leave much to be desired. It's not terrible, but it falls into that average threshold instead. Still, I don't regret buying it though. I'm biased towards cute anime girls, and Ubisoft hits that sweet spot very well. Riddle Joker gets a B from me. Oh boy, School Days. One of the most infamous romance titles out there. Whether you've watched the anime adaptation or read the visual novel, School Days is a chaotic mess of a romance love triangle drama, and that was the whole point of it. There's something sadistically satisfying about watching these immature adolescent individuals drive their relationship off a building, in the worst way possible in the bad endings. The only problem is that you have to suffer through this bastard of a character for several hours until he finally gets what's coming to him. The idea of School Days, a drama-filled romance exploring the worst case scenarios, is a good premise. It's unfortunate that watching these characters is incredibly dull a majority of the time. That is, if you haven't gone mad by the lack of moral common sense from these characters. It's a controversial title for sure, where some argue it's so bad it's good, but for me, while I can appreciate its concept and execution of its premise, from a viewing perspective, it's not that great at holding your attention, which is exactly why I ended up cutting to just the juicy bits of the story from my Experience series videos showing my first reaction reading School Days. This tolerance factor entirely depends on the viewer. School Days gets a B from me. Sugar Style embodies the wild craziness that goes on in a co-ed university dorm, being as off-the-wall and absurd as it can possibly be in anime. Created by SME, the same developers behind Furaraba and Making Lovers, Sugar Style's energy levels is insanely high. It's a title that goes all in on its absurd jokes and fast-paced retorts. I can see a fair amount of people disliking Sugar Style's brand of comedy, placing a lot of emphasis on a shameless, perverted main character and his immature humor. After all, it is about the wild adventures of a male in a now used to be female dorm. It's actually pretty commendable in how much it dedicates itself to its comedy, with the over-exaggerated expressions and overly dramatic sound effects. Outside of these moments, it's got some pretty alright comedy and cute heroines, including one that has the smuggest face I've seen. An unusual thing about this visual novel though, is that it's got odd scene structuring, where the heroine story scenes are intertwined with the common route, which isn't good for consistency. Compared to other titles by SME, I do think Sugar Style is weaker, but it's still an alright title, just not one I would immediately recommend off the bat. That one belongs to Making Lovers, the visual novel that has the only heroine that's scored an S rank in my best visual novel girl tier list. Sugar Style gets a B from me. Tsukihime is the origin point for Type Moon, the title that kickstarted their rise to popularity. It's a beloved cult classic and one that took the world by storm with its announcement of its remake, Tsukihime, A Piece of the Blue Glass Moon, 20 years later. It's a visual novel that certainly shows its age. From its 800 to 600 resolution, the bare minimum functionality, and a seemingly impossible status to obtain, it's not a convenient recommendation to go out and read. But what it does have, however, is a great supernatural story with heart put into each and every one of its characters. For a vampire story, it focuses a lot on its characters and atmosphere rather than its action horror thriller, and it does well in that department. The mystery itself is intriguing and adds a lot of depth to the world, both here and the extended universe. But the writing is rough around the edges, especially in regards to its darker content turned very uncomfortable, no matter how many this chair and defenseless anus memes we get. There's some antique value in reading the old Tsukihime visual novel and a bit of nostalgia if you read it long ago. If you're that desperate to really read it, by all means go ahead. That said, you could wait until the remake gets an English release, either by a fan translation or an official release, but who knows when that will come out. You could probably learn Japanese before then. So then, where do I put the original Tsukihime? If it was more accessible, I would place it higher, because I do think that the story has legitimate merit. However, its negatives, and most of all, its ease of access, drags it down to a low B. And last but certainly not least is Umineko no Naku When the Seagulls Cry. Umineko is an exhilarating roller coaster of a visual novel transforming from an inheritance murder mystery into a fantasy horror thriller. Written by Ryukishi07, the same author as Higurashi, Umineko presents a very complex tale, one as intricate as love itself. All of its characters are involved in this intimate family drama. Each one of them has their own motivations that will keep you asking questions all the way from beginning to end. As you follow the main character battler, you are treated to an action-packed battle of wits against a maniacal laughing witch, crossing the realms between mystery and fantasy. Be prepared though, because Umineko is infamously known for being a very long visual novel, longer than the Bible. It took me 150 hours to read. I'm not joking. I've detailed my entire experience reading Umineko for the first time, but despite its long length, it was quite a worthwhile adventure, one that forced me to really think about who the culprit is, what their motive was, and why they did it. Because Umineko expects you to form your own interpretations of its mysteries and conclusions. Why? Because Umineko doesn't directly give you the answers. It's left deliberately ambiguous. Some people may dislike this, but it's done on purpose. Brilliantly. Umineko is a grand tale that crosses multiple genres and even goes the extra mile in becoming a meta-narrative on how we interpret fiction itself. And along with a high-quality production, it was an unforgettable visual novel experience. And it deserves that spot as one of the best in the medium. I give Umineko no Naku an S. And now it's time for our lightning round of visual novels released in 2021 that I unfortunately was not able to cover this year. However, some of you may be interested in regardless. Eiyuu Senki fans get to conquer the world all over again with historical waifus in the sequel, Eiyuu Senki Gold, with a completely new story and more characters. But most fans probably already knew that already. This one's my favorite, by the way. The Boys Love fanbase are cheering in their corner of the world as they come in droves to buy Dramatical Murder, in what most people believe to be Overdrive's crowning masterpiece in musicus was finally released, telling a thoughtful coming-of-age story as its characters explore the meaning of music and life. A definite 10 out of 10 from what I've heard all around. Moe fans are getting a double dose of pretty cute heroines in Primal Hearts 1 and 2 being released at the same time, as well as other titles like Study Steady and Onigoko. If you're in the mood for something more drama-intensive, Christmas Tina presents a story about the struggle of two individuals in rough times, in what's probably one of the most grounded visual novels of everything I've talked about today. In what was initially an April Fool's joke was turned into reality, as the developers behind the ever so popular Nekopara brings you the same flavor except gender bent in Nekopara, Catboy Paradise. For all you Ace Attorney fans out there, the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles is a sure pickup, featuring everyone's favorite and well-renowned detective in fiction. That's right, Sherlock Sholmes. Smee fans are eating healthy this year because besides Sugar Style releasing this year, Harem Kingdom was also released, in which our main characters get isekai'd and is forced to become the king, all with the duties to build a harem, father heirs, and stimulate the growth of the kingdom. You know, the usual stuff, except in classic Smee off-the-wall comedy absurdities. And for those looking for some sexiness in your horror, check out Abaddon, Princess of Decay, a fun aero RPG with lots of cool retro pixel artwork that unfortunately was banned on Steam for being too sexy. But if you're looking for something a lot more serious in your visual novel gaming, check out Venus Blood Hollow International with SRPG elements with rich fantasy storytelling. And last but not least, take the chance to solve a mystery and fall in love with a pink-haired succubus with lots of animated goodness in Kimagure Temptation. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, it's time to cover the category winners for the year of 2021, starting off with the Best Beginner Visual Novel. And the winners for this category are Doki Doki Literature Club and PARQUET. As much as Doki Doki Literature Club isn't your typical visual novel, I think it's a good representation of what is possible in the visual novel medium. There's a lot of neat narrative and technical tricks inside Doki Doki Literature Club that'll certainly grab your attention. Another plus is that the visual novel is free to play and very short, so anyone can easily pick it up and read. Given its length, it does a great job at concisely conveying its story while also still making you grow attached to these characters in its short time span. And if you pick up its re-release, you'll get plenty more of those intimate, heartfelt moments between its characters. As for PARQUET, this title is more in line with your typical anime Japanese visual novel with a blend of cute characters and an interesting premise, all told in a fairly short length. I think it's a nice introductory visual novel that has a little bit of everything to offer for an all-ages title, while also still having a modern look and feel to it. A casual read for a casual reader that wants to dip their toes into this medium. What's nice is that it's also available on the mobile platform as well if you want to do some reading on the go. However, if you really want to dive deep into a visual novel, may I recommend the next item on our list of category winners. The winner of Best Drama Visual Novel, Umineko no Naku Koro. While Umineko is a murder mystery filled with loads of thrilling fantasy elements, it's also a very complicated family drama. Being such an aristocratic family, the topic of inheritance can get messy, and that leads to a lot of rising tension between all of the family members. It's made even worse when considering that all of them are easily swayed by the 500 tons of gold that the inheritance holds. But if we were to really dig down to its core, it's all part of that base desire of love, romantic or otherwise. Love is a central theme in Umineko, and it's what drives the motivation of our characters. Whether it's for the sake of an individual or the anger towards others stopping it from coming to fruition, it's never that simple. The acts committed by certain people are fueled by this desire and embodies this sense of Shakespearean romantic tragedy. Umineko keeps you hanging in the balance to see how all of this plays out, even though some of them are captured by extreme vices like pride and greed. It's these characters' feelings and emotions that makes them relatable and gives you a reason to care for them, because Umineko wants you to understand them. After all, without love, it cannot be seen. Speaking of, what better way to represent love than with my pick for the best romance visual novel of 2021? I give this award to Kinkoi Gold and Loveriiche. If you like some cute, attractive heroines that have great routes along with them, Kinkoi is a definite pickup. All of the girls are charismatic and charming in their own way. For me personally, for most romance visual novels, there's always one or two heroines that I don't like as much, but with Kinkoi, I can definitely say that I've enjoyed watching all of them, both in building up to the confession and being together in their relationship. It's also not just pure cute slice of life moments either. There's always a character-driven narrative in each of their routes. And as an added bonus, if you also like things to get a bit steamy as well, I can tell you, you won't be disappointed. Now, if romance isn't your cup of tea, but you still want to get your heart pumping, let me introduce to you the winner of the Best Action Adventure Visual Novel, Full Metal Demon Muramasa. This is the title where almost every aspect introduced in Muramasa had me engaged, to the point where I couldn't put it down. From the action-packed mech fight scenes to the suspenseful, shocking events to its thought-provoking themes and messages, Muramasa was one hell of a journey. The main character, Minato Kageaki, is such an intensely interesting person to watch. As he meets people of all different kinds, he's faced with this terrible struggle time and time again. It's this battle within himself that's fascinating, as the choices he makes gets tougher and tougher as he continues down his path. It really makes you wonder if he's going to surpass his weakness or fall victim to his burden and regrets. But no matter how much blood, sweat, and tears are shed, it's an entertaining read, one that doesn't hold back on its rougher, mature content. And now it's time to end this year with my personal favorite visual novel of 2021. And interestingly enough, it's not even a visual novel that I've given an S rating to. It's not Kinkoi, it's not Muramasa, and it's not even Umineko. The top spot for this year of 2021 for my personal favorite visual novel is Meteor World Actor. This was the visual novel I had the most enjoyment reading, and that's mostly attributed to how great the interactions between all the characters are. The banter between Ruka and the rest of the cast is so snappy and inventive. Every individual interacts with Ruka in different ways, but all of them equally return Ruka's rebellious attitude with quick, insulting remarks. It's this type of back and forth duo comedy act that places more of an emphasis on the wittiness of its jokes and strong character personalities that's entertaining to watch. Purely the conversations between Ruka and his younger partner Claris alone is a goldmine. The contrast between Ruka's experienced street smarts and Claris's idealistic, upstanding personality is already a good foundation, but Claris can also equally match Ruka with her own assertive, sharp tongue and sarcasm. In fact, I enjoyed Meteor World actors so much that I ended up marathoning through all of the current releases of Classroom of the Elite and even started looking into Akatsuki no Goe. The conversation writing is the main reason, but this visual novel has so much other good qualities too, from its expansive world building to its visual look and character designs to its jazzy selection music. It's a great package. If there's one thing I hate about it, besides the inconclusive endings, it's the fact that it's so goddamn hard to find. You have to actively search for it because a simple Google search won't lead you directly to it, especially since it was banned by Steam. I'll place a link down below if you're interested in checking it out. Not sponsored at all, I just want people to read what I like. After all, I'm here to help you find something great to read and experience. And that's it for the year of 2021. If you made it to the end of this video, I congratulate you for staying until the very end. These are my final thoughts, and you are free to agree or disagree. I would love to hear them. Like I said before, all of these reviews can be found on the channel if you want a more in-depth look into these visual novels. All of them will be in the description down below. I hope I helped you find a visual novel that may have piqued your interest. And as always, subscribe if you liked the video and want to see more. Check back every week for new content. You can follow me on Twitter at TheAugustTale if you are interested, as well as any other platforms like Steam, VNDB, or any other site out there. Thank you for watching, and here's to another great year of visual novels. See ya.